The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with worried voices. Representatives from 100 different worlds sat in their seats, all of them watching the massive display screen at the center of the room. On the screen, 3,000 Corvani warships moved through space like a swarm of angry insects. Their destination was clear to everyone. They were heading toward New Eden, a human colony world with 12 million people living on it. Ambassador Zeleth, a tall creature with pale blue skin and 4 arms, stood at the central podium. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed his fear. The Corvani Empire has refused all attempts at negotiation. High Admiral Vorath has declared that he will burn New Eden to ash as punishment for human interference in Corvani territory. A murmur spread through the council chamber. The Corvani were known for their cruelty. They had destroyed other worlds before, leaving nothing but dead rock and silence behind them. Many of the council members had hoped that the young human species would not draw the attention of such a dangerous enemy. But humans had a habit of standing up for others, even when it put them at risk. 3 months ago, human ships had rescued a convoy of refugees that the Corvani had claimed as slaves. Now the Corvani wanted revenge. What is the human response? Asked a council member from the Vethri delegation. Surely they are sending their fleet to defend their colony. Zeleth looked down at his datapad. His 4 hands trembled slightly as he read the information. Earth Command has responded to the crisis. They have dispatched military assets to New Eden. How many ships? Another delegate called out. Zeleth paused. He read the number again, certain that there must be some mistake. But the information remained the same. 1, he said quietly. The humans have sent 1 vessel. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in confusion and disbelief. Some laughed at what they thought was a joke. Others demanded to know if the humans had simply given up and abandoned their people. How could any species send a single ship against 3,000? Far across the galaxy, aboard the flagship of the Corvani invasion fleet, High Admiral Vorath received the same information. He was a massive creature, covered in thick gray scales and standing nearly 3 meters tall. His red eyes glowed with amusement as his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Thyrus, delivered the report. 1 ship? Vorath's deep voice rumbled with laughter. The humans send 1 ship to face my armada? I had heard they were bold, but I did not know they were stupid. Thyrus, smaller and more cautious than his commander, studied the sensor data with concern. Perhaps it is a trap, Admiral. The humans are known for their tricks. What trick could save them now? Vorath spread his massive arms wide, gesturing at the fleet surrounding his ship. We have 3,000 vessels. Our weapons can crack planets. 1 human ship is nothing but an insect to be crushed. The fleet continued its advance. In 2 days, they would reach New Eden. Vorath was already planning how he would broadcast the destruction of the colony to the entire galaxy. He wanted every species to see what happened to those who defied the Corvani Empire. The humans would learn fear, and the galaxy would learn to stay out of Corvani affairs. The single human vessel arrived at New Eden 18 hours before the Corvani fleet. It dropped out of hyperspace in a flash of blue light and took position directly between the planet and the approaching enemy. The ship hung in the darkness of space, alone and seemingly small against the vast backdrop of stars. On the bridge of that ship, Commander Lisa Brennan stood with her hands clasped behind her back. She was a woman in her early 40s, with short brown hair and steady green eyes. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years, but she had never commanded a mission like this one. No one had. All stations report ready, Commander, said Lieutenant Kevin Shaw from the tactical console. He was a young man with a serious face, and his fingers moved quickly across his controls. Weapons are charged, and shields are at full power. Dr. Amy Torres, the ship's chief science officer, looked up from her station. She was older than most of the crew, with gray streaks in her dark hair. "I'm detecting the Corvani fleet at the edge of sensor range. They'll be here in approximately 17 hours. Brennan nodded slowly. "And the colony?" "Evacuation is proceeding," Torres replied. "But there's no way to get everyone off the planet in time. At best, they can save maybe 2 million people before the Corvani arrive." That meant 10 million people were counting on this ship. 10 million lives depending on Brennan and her crew. She felt the weight of that responsibility, but she did not let it show on her face. A commander could not afford to show doubt. "Not now. Ensign Cole," she said, turning to the young communications officer. "Open a channel to the Corvani flagship. All frequencies." Danny Cole, barely 22 years old and fresh from the academy, swallowed nervously. "Channel open, Commander." Brennan stepped forward. Her voice was calm and clear as she spoke. "Corvani Fleet, this is Commander Lisa Brennan of the USS Avalon. You are approaching a protected human world. Turn back now. This is your only warning." The message flew across the void of space. Minutes later, a response came. High Admiral Vorath's scarred face appeared on the main screen, his red eyes burning with contempt. "One ship," Vorath said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You send one ship and one warning? Human, you have courage. I will grant you that. But courage will not save your people. I will destroy your little vessel, and then I will burn your colony until nothing remains but smoke and memory." Brennan did not flinch. "You have been warned, Admiral. What happens next is your choice." Vorath laughed and cut the transmission dot in the council chamber. The delegates watched the exchange with growing despair. Ambassador Zeleth shook his head sadly. He had grown fond of the humans since they had joined the galactic community. They were strange creatures, full of contradictions. They could be violent and gentle, foolish and wise, all at the same time. And now they seemed determined to throw away lives on a hopeless gesture. "Why?" whispered a delegate from the Morati cluster. "Why would they send just one ship?" No one had an answer. They could only watch and wait as the hours passed and the Corvani fleet drew closer. 3,000 warships against one lone vessel. It seemed like madness. It seemed like suicide, but the humans had a secret. And soon, the entire galaxy would understand why one ship was all they needed to send. The Corvani fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark cloud spreading across the stars. 3,000 warships of every size filled the space around New Eden. Destroyers and cruisers took formation around massive battleships. And at the center of it all sat the flagship, a vessel so large it could have held a small city inside its hull. High Admiral Vorath stood on his command bridge, watching the single human ship on his view screen. "Pathetic," he growled. "They did not even try to run." Sub-Commander Thares worked at his sensor station, his clawed fingers moving quickly across the controls. Something about the human vessel bothered him. The readings were strange. The ship appeared to be a standard heavy cruiser, perhaps 500 meters long. But the energy signature was wrong. It was too high, much too high. "Admiral," Thares said carefully, "I am detecting unusual readings from the human ship. Its power output is far beyond what a vessel of that size should produce." Vorath waved his hand dismissively. "Human tricks. They probably overloaded their reactor to make themselves look more threatening. It changes nothing. Order the first attack group forward. 500 ships should be more than enough to destroy one cruiser." The first wave of Corvani vessels broke formation and surged toward the Avalon. Their weapons charged with a deadly hum, and targeting systems locked onto the lone human ship. On the Corvani flagship, officers began to smile. This would be over quickly. Aboard the Avalon, Lieutenant Kevin Shaw watched his tactical display with calm focus. "Commander, 500 Corvani vessels are approaching. They'll be in weapons range in 3 minutes. Commander Lisa Brennan stood at the center of the bridge, her arms folded across her chest. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The entire crew had trained for years in secret, preparing for the day when the Avalon would finally reveal its true purpose. That day had come. "Dr. Torres," Brennan said, "begin the transformation sequence." Amy Torres nodded and entered a long series of commands into her console. Sequence initiated. All sections report ready. Deep within the Avalon, massive machinery began to move. Systems that had been locked and hidden for 10 years came to life. The ship's outer hull started to shift, segments sliding apart and unfolding like the petals of a strange metal flower. What had appeared to be a simple cruiser was only the core of something much, much larger. On the Corvani flagship, alarms suddenly screamed across every console. Thyros stared at his sensors in disbelief. "Admiral, the human ship is. It's changing." Varath turned to look at the view screen, and for the first time in his long military career, his red eyes went wide with shock. The Avalon was growing. Massive sections of hull extended outward from the central structure, revealing hidden weapons platforms and shield generators. The ship stretched and expanded, its true form emerging from within its disguised shell. What had been a 500-meter cruiser transformed into something that defied belief. The vessel grew to 1 kilometer, then 2, then 3. It kept growing until it reached its full length of 5 kilometers. The USS Avalon was not a ship. It was a mobile battle station, a fortress built to face entire fleets alone. In the council chamber, the delegates had fallen completely silent. They watched the transformation with expressions of wonder and fear. Ambassador Zeleth gripped the edge of his podium, unable to speak. He had known that humans were clever. He had known they were brave, but he had never imagined anything like this. "Impossible," whispered a Vethri delegate. How did they build such a thing without anyone knowing? The answer was simple. Humans had learned long ago that the galaxy was a dangerous place. They had watched other species fall to the Corvani and to other threats. They had decided that they needed a weapon that could stand alone against any enemy. And so, in secret shipyards hidden in the asteroid belts of distant systems, they had built the Avalon. It had taken 10 years of secret work. Thousands of engineers and workers had given their lives to the project, never telling anyone outside Earth's government what they were creating. Now that secret stood, revealed before the Galaxy. Commander. Brennan allowed herself a small smile as she watched the Corvani fleet on her view screen. The 500 ships that had been charging toward them had stopped. They hung in space, their advance frozen by confusion and fear. "Ensign Cole, open a channel to the Galactic Council," she ordered. Danny Cole's fingers flew across his console. "Channel open, Commander." Brennan spoke clearly so that every delegate in the council chamber could hear her words. "This is the USS Avalon. Designation Mobile Defense Platform 1. We carry 300 plasma lance batteries, 48 heavy, missile systems, and a main cannon capable of destroying a capital ship with a single shot. Our shields can withstand the combined firepower of 1,000 vessels. We were built to defend humanity's colonies and allies against any threat." She paused. The Corvani Empire chose to threaten innocent lives. Now they will face the consequences of that choice. On the Corvani flagship, High Admiral Varath stood frozen before his view screen. The human battle station filled his display, its hull bristling with weapons that were now pointed directly at his fleet. The confidence he had felt only minutes ago had turned to ash in his mouth. "Admiral," Thyri said urgently, "we should retreat. We cannot face a weapon like that." Varath's clawed hands clenched into fists. His pride burned inside him like a fire. He had never retreated from any battle. He had destroyed worlds and crushed empires. He would not run from humans and their oversized ship. No, he growled. We have 3,000 ships. They have one. Numbers will win this fight. All ships, attack. Destroy that station. The entire Corvani fleet surged forward. Thousands of engines flared to life as the armada charged toward the Avalon. It was the largest single attack in Corvani military history. Varath was certain that even the human battle station could not survive the combined firepower of his entire force. On the bridge of the Avalon, Lieutenant Shaw reported the enemy movement without any fear in his voice. All Corvani vessels are advancing. Time to engagement, 2 minutes. Commander Brennan took her seat in the captain's chair. Her crew moved with smooth efficiency around her, each person focused on their task. They had trained for this moment. They were ready. All hands, battle stations. Brennan announced over the ship's communication system. This is what we were built for. Let's show them what humanity can do. The crew responded with determined silence. There were no cheers, no shouts of anger or fear. Just calm focus and absolute trust in their commander and their ship. The Avalon's weapons powered up, filling the void of space with a deep humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of reality. The Corvani fleet opened fire. Thousands of energy beams and missiles streaked through space toward the human battle station, a wave of destruction that would have vaporized any normal ship in seconds. The Avalon did not move. It did not need to. Brennan's voice was steady as she gave the order that would change the course of galactic history. Return fire. The first wave of Corvani weapons struck the Avalon's shields in a storm of fire and light. Thousands of energy beams and missiles slammed against the barrier, creating explosions that lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. Any other ship in the galaxy would have been torn apart in seconds. The Avalon did not even shake Dot on the bridge. Dr. Amy Torres watched her console with steady eyes. Shields holding at 94%. The enemy weapons are having minimal effect. Commander Lisa Brennan nodded. The Avalon shields had been designed to handle exactly this kind of assault. Human engineers had spent years studying Corvani weapons and building defenses that could withstand them. Now that preparation was proving its worth. All weapons batteries, Brennan commanded. Fire at will. The Avalon answered her order with devastating force. 300 plasma lance batteries opened fire simultaneously, sending streams of superheated energy across the void of space. Each beam struck with enough power to cut through the hull of a Corvani warship like a knife through paper. The first line of enemy vessels simply ceased to exist, their hulls torn apart and their crews vaporized in an instant. But the Avalon was just getting started. Missile tubes along the station's hull spat out swarms of warheads, each one capable of tracking and destroying enemy fighters and small ships. Heavy turrets rotated and fired, picking off cruisers and destroyers with terrible accuracy. And at the center of the battle station, the main cannon began to charge. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw tracked the battle on his tactical display. His voice remained calm, even as he reported numbers that would have seemed impossible only an hour ago. 50 enemy vessels destroyed. 100. 150. In less than 5 minutes, the Avalon had eliminated 200 Corvani warships. The space around New Eden became filled with debris and fire as the human battle station continued its assault. Escape pods launched from crippled vessels, their crews desperate to flee the destruction. On the Corvani flagship, High Admiral Varath watched the battle with growing horror. His fleet was dying before his eyes. Ships that had conquered worlds were being swatted aside like insects. The human battle station sat at the center of the chaos, its weapons firing in all directions with mechanical precision. "This cannot be," Varath growled. "Order all ships to concentrate fire on the station's weapon systems. Destroy their guns." Sub-Commander Thuris relayed the order, but his hands trembled as he worked. He had known this was a mistake. He had warned Vorith that the humans were dangerous. Now thousands of Corvini warriors were paying for their admiral's pride. The fleet tried to follow Vorith's command. Hundreds of ships focused their weapons on the Avalon's plasma batteries, hoping to silence the deadly guns. Some shots got through the shields and struck the armored hull. A few weapons platforms took damage and went offline. But for every gun that fell silent, dozens more continued firing. Commander Brennan watched the damage reports scroll across her console. The Avalon was taking hits, but nothing critical. The ship's armor was holding, and repair teams were already working to restore the damaged systems. "Commander," Ensign Danny Cole called out from his station. "I'm receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council. They're requesting a direct feed of the battle." Brennan considered for a moment, then nodded. "Give it to them. Let the entire galaxy see what happens to those who threaten human lives." The battle was broadcast across thousands of worlds. Billions of beings watched as a single human vessel fought against an armada. They saw Corvani ships explode by the dozens. They saw the Avalon stand firm against everything thrown at it. And slowly, they began to understand something that would change galactic politics forever. Humans were not the weak, young species that many had believed them to be. They were a civilization that could build weapons to challenge empires. They were a people who would fight against impossible odds to protect their own. And they were angry. In the council chamber, Ambassador Zeleth watched the battle with a mixture of awe and sadness. He understood what this meant for the future. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Some species would fear them. Others would seek their protection. The balance of power was shifting before his eyes. 300 enemy vessels destroyed, Lieutenant Shaw reported. 400. The Corvani formation is starting to break. The organized lines of the Corvani fleet were falling apart. Ships that had been advancing in formation were now scattering, their captains trying to find some angle of attack that wouldn't result in immediate destruction. But the Avalon's weapons tracked them wherever they went. There was no safe place in the battle zone. High Admiral Vorith slammed his fist against his command console, cracking the metal surface. "Cowards! All of you cowards! Press the attack. We still outnumber them." But numbers meant nothing against a weapon like the Avalon. The human battle station had been designed to fight alone against entire fleets. Every system, every weapon, every piece of armor had been built with that purpose in mind. The Corvani were learning a hard lesson about the dangers of underestimating humanity. "Commander." Brennan stood from her chair and walked to the front of a bridge. Through the main view screen, she could see the chaos of the battle. Corvani ships burned and broke apart. Debris filled the void between stars. It was a terrible sight, and she took no pleasure in it. But she had a duty to protect the people of New Eden, and she would do whatever was necessary to fulfill that duty. Main cannon ready. Dr. Torres announced that the Avalon's primary weapon was a massive particle accelerator that ran through the entire length of the station. It took 3 minutes to charge fully, but when it fired, nothing could survive its impact. Brennan had hoped she wouldn't need to use it. That hope was dying along with the Corvani fleet. "Target the largest concentration of enemy ships," she ordered. "Fire when ready." The main cannon activated with a sound like thunder echoing through the void. A beam of pure white energy lanced out from the front of the Avalon, so bright that it overloaded sensors across the entire system. The beam struck a group of Corvani battleships that had been preparing for a coordinated assault. 15 capital ships vanished in an instant, along with the 30 smaller vessels that had been escorting them. On the Corvani flagship, every officer fell silent. They had just witnessed the destruction of some of their most powerful warships in a single shot. The weapon that killed them was now turning toward new targets. "Admiral," Tyrus whispered, "we have lost over 500 ships. If we continue this attack, we will all die." Vorath's red eyes burned with rage. But for the first time, there was something else in them. Fear. He was finally beginning to understand that this battle could not be won. The humans had built something beyond anything his species had ever faced, but his pride would not let him retreat. Not yet. There had to be some way to destroy the human station. Some weakness he could exploit. He would find it, no matter how many ships he had to sacrifice. "Continue the attack," he commanded. "All ships, continue the attack." The Kolvani fleet obeyed, though many captains did so with despair in their hearts. They pressed forward into the storm of human weapons fire, dying by the hundreds for an admiral who refused to accept defeat. And at the center of it all, the Avalon stood firm, its guns never stopping, its shields never failing. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity showed its true strength. The battle had been raging for 3 hours. The space around New Eden had become a graveyard of broken ships and scattered debris. The Kolvani fleet had lost over 1,500 vessels, more than half of the armada that had arrived to destroy the human colony. But High Admiral Vorath had finally found what he was looking for. There, Vorath pointed at his tactical display with a clawed finger. "The human station's shields are weakening on the port side. Concentrated fire has been draining their power reserves. If we strike there with everything we have, we can break through." Sub-Commander Thyrus studied the data and nodded slowly. The Admiral was right. The Avalon's shields had been holding strong throughout the battle, but they weren't infinite. Hours of constant bombardment had begun to take their toll. The port side showed a small but measurable decrease in shield strength. "Order all remaining ships to focus fire on that section," Vorath commanded. "We may lose more warriors, but we will crack that shell." The surviving Kolvani vessels received the order and began to reposition. Nearly 1,400 ships turned toward the Avalon's port side, their weapons charging for a massive concentrated assault. It was a desperate move, but Vorath had no other choice. His fleet could not survive another 3 hours of this punishment. On the Avalon's bridge, Lieutenant Kevin Shaw detected the enemy movement immediately. "Commander, the Kolvani are changing formation. All remaining ships are converging on our port side." Commander Lisa Brennan frowned. She had been expecting something like this. The Kolvani had been taking losses that would have made any other fleet retreat hours ago. Vorath was clearly willing to sacrifice his entire armada if it meant destroying the Avalon. That kind of fanatical determination was dangerous. "Shield status on the port side?" She asked. Dr. Amy Torres checked their console, and her expression grew concerned. "Shields at 68% on the port side. We've been absorbing a lot of fire from that direction. If they hit us with everything they have, the shields could fail." "Reroute power from non-essential systems," Brennan ordered. "Reinforce those shields." The crew worked quickly to shift power throughout the station. Lights dimmed in corridors and storage areas as energy was redirected to the shield generators. But even with the extra power, Torres shook her head. "It won't be enough," she said quietly. "If 1,400 ships fire on us at once, we'll lose the port shields within 4 minutes. After that, they'll be hitting our armor directly." The Avalon's armor was strong, but it wasn't invincible. Without shields, the concentrated fire of over 1,000 warships would eventually tear through the hull. Systems would fail. Weapons would go offline. The crew would start dying. And if the damage reached the reactor core, the entire station could be destroyed. Brennan closed her eyes for a moment, thinking. She had one option left, a weapon that had never been tested in actual combat. The Avalon's designers had called it the gravity pulse generator. It was meant to be a last resort, a way to clear the battlefield if the station ever faced truly overwhelming odds. But no one knew exactly what would happen when it was used. "Lieutenant Shaw," she said, opening her eyes. "What's the status of the gravity pulse generator?" Shaw looked up in surprise. Everyone on the bridge knew about the gravity pulse, but no one had expected to actually use it. "It's fully charged, Commander, but we've never fired it before. The simulations suggested it would work, but simulations aren't the same as reality." "I understand," Brennan replied. "Begin the activation sequence. If the Kravani break through our shields, we'll meet it ready." The Kravani fleet completed its formation and began its assault. Over 1,400 ships opened fire on the Avalon's port side, creating a wall of energy and explosions that hammered against the weakening shields. The station shook for the first time since the battle began. Alarms started sounding across the bridge as damage reports flooded in. "Port shields at 40%, Torres reported, her voice strained. 30%. They're collapsing faster than we can reinforce them." Brennan gripped the arms of her chair. She could feel the station trembling around her, absorbing impacts that would have vaporized any normal ship. Her crew worked with desperate focus, doing everything they could to keep the shields up. But it wasn't enough. "Shields have failed on the port side," Torres announced. "They're hitting our armor." The Kravani weapons began striking the Avalon's hull directly. Explosions tore into the outer layers of armor, ripping apart plating and destroying secondary systems. A plasma battery on the port side went offline. Then another. Emergency teams rushed to seal breaches and prevent fires from spreading. On the Kravani flagship, Vorath allowed himself a savage smile. "We have them." "Keep firing. Don't stop until that station is dust." Ensign Danny Cole looked up from his station, fear showing in his young eyes for the first time. "Commander, we've lost 12% of our portside weapons. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 15. Casualties are being reported." Brennan felt the weight of those words. Her people were dying. The ship she had sworn to protect was being torn apart. She had hoped to end this battle without using the gravity pulse, but hope was no longer an option. "Lieutenant Shaw," she commanded, "activate the gravity pulse generator. Target the main concentration of enemy vessels." Shaw's hands moved across his console. "Gravity pulse activating. Field generation in 30 seconds." Deep within the Avalon, a machine unlike anything else in the galaxy came to life. The gravity pulse generator was humanity's most advanced weapon, a device that could create a focused gravitational wave powerful enough to crush anything caught within its range. The technology was based on theories that most species believed were impossible. But humans had a habit of making the impossible real. "Field generation in 10 seconds, Shaw counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Avalon released the gravity pulse. It was invisible, but its effects were not. A wave of gravitational force exploded outward from the station, washing over the Kravani ships like a tsunami. Within the pulse's range, the laws of physics became weapons. Hull plating crumpled like paper. Engines imploded. Ships were crushed from every direction at once. Their crews killed instantly as their vessels collapsed around them. 800 Kravani warships were destroyed in less than 3 seconds. The surviving ships were thrown out of formation, tumbling through space as the gravitational wave pushed them away from the Avalon. Weapons fire stopped as crews struggled to regain control of their damaged vessels. The coordinated assault had been broken in a single moment. On the Kravani flagship, High Admiral Vorath stared at his display in disbelief. More than half of his remaining fleet had just been wiped out by a weapon he had never seen before. His ship had been at the edge of the pulse's range, and even so, hull breaches had opened across multiple decks. Warning lights flashed everywhere. His officers shouted damage reports that he barely heard. "What was that?" he whispered. "What did they do?" Sub-Commander Theories looked up from his console with something like terror in his eyes. "Admiral, the human station generated a localized gravitational anomaly. It crushed our ships, using their own weight against them. I have never seen anything like it. Vorath's flagship listed to one side as its damaged engines struggled to keep the vessel stable. Around him, the survivors of his once great fleet drifted in chaos. Fewer than 600 ships remained operational, and many of those were badly damaged. The Kavani Empire had sent 3,000 warships to destroy a human colony. Now their mighty armada was broken and scattered. Defeated by a single enemy vessel, Commander Brennan watched the aftermath of the gravity pulse on her view screen. The destruction was almost beyond comprehension. She had known the weapon would be powerful, but seeing its effects made her feel a strange mix of relief and horror. So many lives ended in an instant. Even enemy lives weighed on her conscience, but the battle wasn't over yet. Vorath's flagship was still active, and as long as the Admiral lived, he might try to continue the fight. "All hands," Brennan announced over the ship's communication system. "Prepare for final engagement. Let's finish this." The Kavani fleet was broken. Of the 3,000 warships that had arrived at New Eden, fewer than 600 remained. Many of those were damaged and drifting, their crews struggling to keep their vessels alive. The space around the human colony was filled with debris, escape pods, and the scattered remains of an armada that had thought itself invincible. High Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of his crippled flagship, watching the destruction on his view screen. His massive body seemed smaller now, his red eyes dimmed by the weight of defeat. Everything he had built, everything he had conquered, meant nothing against the human battle station that still hung in space before him. "Admiral," Sub-Commander Thyrus said quietly, "our engines are failing. Weapons are offline. We have no way to continue the fight." Vorath said nothing. For the first time in his long career, he had no orders to give. He had led his warriors into a trap, and now they were paying for his pride with their lives. On the Avalon's bridge, Commander Lisa Brennan assessed the situation with careful attention. The enemy fleet was scattered and helpless, but she knew that a cornered enemy could still be dangerous. Desperate captains might try suicide runs against the station. Vorath might have some final weapon hidden aboard his flagship. "Lieutenant Shaw, what's the status of the Corvani flagship?" she asked. Kevin Shaw studied his console. "Their weapons and engines are down. They're dead in the water. But I'm still reading life signs aboard. The ship hasn't been abandoned." Brennan nodded slowly. She had a choice to make. The easy thing would be to destroy Vorath's flagship and end the threat forever. No one would blame her for it. The Kavani had come to kill 12 million innocent people. They deserved whatever fate they received. But that wasn't the human way. At least, it wasn't the way Brennan believed humanity should be. "Ensign Cole, open a channel to the Corvani flagship." Danny Cole hesitated for just a moment before following the order. "Channel open, Commander." Brennan stepped forward and spoke clearly. "High Admiral Vorath, your fleet is defeated. You have no weapons, no engines, and no hope of victory. I am offering you one chance to surrender. Power down your remaining systems and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be treated according to galactic conventions. If you refuse, I will be forced to destroy your ship." There was a long silence. Then Vorath's face appeared on the view screen. He looked older than before, his scales dull and his eyes tired. The proud admiral who had threatened to burn New Eden was gone. In his place was a warrior facing the end of everything. "Why?" Vorath asked, his voice rough. "Why do you offer mercy?" "We came to kill your people. We would have shown you no kindness." Brennan met his gaze without flinching. "Because destroying you would not bring back the Corvani, who have already died. Because killing you would not undo the fear you tried to spread. And because humanity does not measure itself by the actions of its enemies. We fight to protect, not to destroy. If you surrender, your surviving warriors will live. That is more than you would have given us." Varath stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his head. "We surrender. I surrender. Do with me what you will." The transmission ended. Across the battlefield, the surviving Corvani ships began powering down their systems and broadcasting surrender signals. The battle was over. Dr. Amy Torres looked up from her console with surprise in her eyes. "Commander, the Corvani are launching escape pods. Hundreds of them. They're abandoning their damaged ships. Send out search and rescue teams," Brennan ordered. "Pick up every pod we can find. I don't care if they were our enemies 5 minutes ago. They're survivors now, and they need help." The Avalon's shuttle bays opened, and rescue craft streamed out into the debris field. Human pilots flew dangerous missions through the wreckage, collecting Corvani escape pods and bringing them back to the station. Medical teams prepared to receive wounded enemies, treating their injuries with the same care they would give their own crew. In the Galactic Council chamber, the delegates watched these events with something close to disbelief. They had expected humanity to finish the Corvani off. They had expected revenge and destruction. Instead, they saw mercy. They saw a species that had every reason to hate its enemies choosing to save them instead. "Ambassador." Zelith rose from his seat and addressed the council. "What we have witnessed today will reshape galactic history. The humans have shown us 2 things. First, they have the power to face any threat. Second, they have the wisdom to use that power with restraint. I believe we have much to learn from them." Hours later, High Admiral Varath was brought aboard the Avalon. Guards escorted him to a holding cell, but Commander Brennan met him on the way. She stood before the massive Corvani warrior, small by comparison but unbowed. "You fought well," she said. "Your warriors were brave. I wish this battle had never happened." Varath looked down at her with confusion in his red eyes. "I do not understand you humans. I came to murder your people. I would have burned your colony and laughed at the ashes. And yet you rescue my survivors and speak to me with respect. Why? What do you gain from showing kindness to your enemy?" Brennan considered the question carefully before answering. "We gain nothing. And that's exactly the point. Kindness isn't supposed to be a transaction. It's supposed to be who you are. We built the Avalon because we knew someday we would have to fight. But we never wanted to become monsters in order to win. If we saved our colony by becoming as cruel as you, then what exactly would we be saving?" Varath was silent for a long time. Then he spoke in a quieter voice than Brennan had ever heard from him. "Perhaps my people have been wrong about humans. Perhaps we have been wrong about many things." "Perhaps," Brennan agreed. "But that's a conversation for another day. For now, you should rest. The war is over." The guards led Varath away to his cell. Brennan watched him go, then turned and walked back to the bridge. Her crew was waiting for her, tired but victorious. They had done the impossible. They had faced an armada alone and won. "Ensign Cole," she said as she took her seat, "open a channel to the Galactic Council." Cole nodded. "Channel open, Commander." Ambassador Zelith's face appeared on the main view screen. Behind him, Brennan could see the gathered delegates of 100 worlds, all watching her with new eyes. "Commander Brennan," Zelith said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I wish to thank humanity for its actions today. You have protected not only your own people, but the peace of the galaxy. The Council would like to formally invite humanity to join as a full member, with all the rights and responsibilities the position carries." Brennan smiled slightly. "Ambassador, I'll pass that invitation along to my government. I suspect they'll be pleased to accept. One more thing," Zelith added. "Many have asked me why Earth sent only 1 ship to face 3,000. I told them I did not know. Would you care to answer that question for the historical record?" Brennan stood from her chair and looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting her image across the galaxy. She thought of her crew, of the battles they had fought, of the enemies they had defeated and then saved. She thought of what it meant to be human in a universe full of dangers. "We sent one ship," she said, "because one ship was enough." The transmission ended. The delegates erupted in discussion, their voices filling the council chamber with 1,000 different reactions. But Brennan didn't hear any of it. She was looking out at the stars, at the planet they had saved, at the galaxy that would never again make the mistake of underestimating humanity. The battle was over. The message was sent. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other species were watching and learning the truth about the small blue world called Earth. Humans were protectors. Humans were builders. And when they had to be, humans were warriors. The galaxy would remember this day for a very long time,